Good morning, and you're very welcome to this morning's Signpost webinar. You're very welcome on this, I suppose, slightly dreary Friday morning. I'm here with Cathal Somers. We're both in Tipperary for the morning. I'm delighted to welcome Kevin Kilcline, Dr. Kevin Kilcline, a researcher and project lead on the GROFarmS project. Kevin is based in our research centre in Athenry. Kevin, you're very welcome. Kevin, you're working on the GROFarmS project, which is about growing resilient organic farming systems. I suppose if we look back at the last few years, Minister Hackett came into office almost 5 years ago now, and one of our key objectives would have been to grow organic farming in Ireland. And with a launch of a number of tranches of the organic scheme, there has been a massive growth in the number of organic farms operating in the country. And I suppose what we're now looking at is backing up that growth in organic farming with research and advisory. There's been a huge growth in advisory numbers in the organics space, and I suppose backing that up with good quality research. That's what your project, I think, is about.
Yes, thanks, Pat, for the introduction. Yeah, absolutely. There's been a significant growth in the organic sector, and there are a number of kind of research gaps existing there. And as I said, there's been investment across different organisations, including Teagasc, to try and support farmers in that conversion process. And a big part of that, obviously, is trying to provide that scientific evidence to support, best practice adoption. So that's where the GROFarmS project and a number of other research projects that are being developed come in, Pat. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just in Athenry in economics. It entails a good number of our centres around Teagasc.
Yeah, there's been a really cross-departmental effort to develop, I suppose, to identify what the research questions are and to come up with the kind of research projects and solutions that can maybe address some of those challenges. So there has been significant effort being put in and working groups set up to try and identify those issues, Pat. Yeah.
Okay. So without further ado, I might get you to share your screen again there and give your presentation.
Thanks. Can you see the presentation? Okay. Thanks. Yeah, so the title of my presentation today is growing.
Sorry, no, we're not seeing it in presentation mode. We're seeing it in kind of dual mode with your note. Wow.
Yeah, I'll just switch 1 second.
While you're doing that, I'll just remind people that as you go through the presentation, if you have questions, to use the questions and answers. Yeah, and no matter how many times you practice this, it sometimes gets a little bit tricky, so don't worry, we'll get there.
Okay, apologies.
Okay, we have it there now.
That's great. Thanks, Pat. Yeah, so the title of my presentation today is GROFarmS, or Growing Resilient Organic Farming Systems. And this is a large cross-departmental organic research project which I'm coordinating and which is run in collaboration with UCD and funded by Department of Agriculture. So it's great to get the opportunity to discuss some of this new research on organic farming systems. And I'll discuss the GROFarmS project in more detail later in the presentation, along with touching on a number of other organic research projects that are due to begin or are currently under final review. But I'll start with a short summary of the recent expansion that Pat mentioned in organic farming and the challenges that it created for the ag sector. So this provides some background to these projects and how they've been developed, how and why they've been developed to address key research questions in organic farming. So in terms of the current state of play of organic farming, in the past number of years, many will be aware that there's been growing interest in organics. A large number of farms have converted and many more are considering their options. So since 2020, there's been a tripling of organic farm numbers, and there are now 5,000 organic farmers representing 5% of the land area. So of these 5,000 farms, the biggest adopters have been beef farms, in particular suckler farms. And you can see from the graphic that 80% of organic farms are in the dry stock sector, so across beef and sheep enterprises. Under the programme for government, there's also the ambition to go further and reach a target of this 7.5% land area by 2027, or 10% by 2030. So that will require approximately 1,000 additional farms converting to organics each year, and the same number that joined the organic farming scheme this time last year. And it's quite timely at the moment because the organic farming scheme has just opened to new applicants again. So it'll be very interesting to see the level of uptake this year. So what that means in terms of regional spread is that most of these predominantly beef and sheep farms are located in the western half of the country. It's worth also noting that while this is a significant change in land use and expansion in organic farming, Ireland still lags behind most of our European neighbours in terms of organic adoption. And you can see that from this graphic here. In the bar charts, you can see what the breakdown of the percentage share of agricultural land area that's farmed organically by EU member states. So the average across the EU in 2020 was just over 10.5%, while for Ireland it's only now at that 5% mark. So despite recent surge in our level of organic adoption, it's still relatively low in comparison to our European neighbours. And while our target is to reach 10% by 2030, the EU target, just put in context, is to reach 25% land area at the same time. Sorry, and that's just highlighting the Ireland, the bar chart there, the Ireland's land share in red. In terms of what that means for organic sector, so to summarize recent developments, historically we've relatively low level of uptake of organic farming in Ireland. We lag behind our EU neighbours. And this is underpinned by, I suppose, low levels of investment in organic farming generally, historically. More recently, that has been changing, and there's been a surge in interest in organic farming and adoption by farmers. And this is supported by setting up of ambitious targets for organic sector growth within EU and national agriculture policy. In particular, this has been underpinned by a national CAP strategic plan with a strong budget to support organic farming conversion through the enhanced organic farming scheme. So targets for organics are now part of the Climate Action Plan and Sectoral Food Vision Strategy, and supported by National Implementation Plan, the National Organic Strategy, which has clear responsibilities for key stakeholders to ensure the delivery of this growth trajectory. So the nature of the expansion in the sector has also raised some challenges. Recent research on organic farming as part of an EU Horizon project, LIFT, which was led by Mary Ryan, which I worked myself, provides some initial research on organic farming, in particular things like leakage in the organic sector. So some of you will be aware of this idea of leakage. It's a particular issue in the organic dry stock sector, whereby a portion of the livestock raised in organic suckler and sheep farms are being sold conventionally. And this effectively results in a loss of value to the sector. And that relates back to the issue of this unbalanced supply chain that I highlighted earlier, where most of the conversion has been by suckler farmers, with less organic beef finishing farms coming on stream who have the capacity to finish these weanlings or stores organically. This is also linked to a shortage of organic tillage and feed crops grown, which results in issues around organic feed availability and price, and reliance on more expensive imported organic concentrates. Leading on from this research, a Teagasc organic working group was established, chaired by Mary, as I mentioned earlier, which brought together researchers, advisory, education staff from across the organisation. And the input of this group was also instrumental maybe in supporting some of those investments that Pat mentioned in terms of KT and the advisory side things, but also in research and education within Teagasc. The group also identified a number of other research gaps in the field, including lack of efficient production blueprints for organic farming systems, a lack of data on costs of production, environmental impact, product quality, biodiversity benefits, all required to support evidence-based organic farming conversion and best practice adoption, and indeed to inform policy, organic farming policy. So the input of this group was brought together and formed the initial GROFarmS project proposal, which was submitted to the Department of Agriculture. So overall, what you can say is, I suppose, what's required to grow and develop the organic sector. We can see that this recent surge in interest in organics is significant land use change, significant innovation, but also there's challenges for the sector. To grow and develop the sector further not only challenges the capacity of these adoptant farmers to develop new skills and management practices, but also the capacity of the entire value chain and the wider institutions, agricultural institutions with which these farmers engage. A strong point for the sector, though, is that it has a clear national organic strategy. And this brought together stakeholders from across the sector and the organic and general agriculture sector to develop a vision to drive growth and development in the sector up to 2030. So the most recently published it's recently been published and it really constitutes a national implementation plan in that it identifies strategic priority areas, and it's linked to clear actions to drive sector growth up to 2030. So by bringing together the input of these key stakeholders from across the agriculture sector, including Teagasc, it has assigned responsibilities for delivery of specific actions to individual stakeholders. And when you review the document, I've pulled out some areas where Teagasc research aims to respond, and it just highlights some of the breadth of these new organic research proposals that have been developed, not just on the GROFarmS project. So in terms of the call for economic analysis of organic farming systems annually, and this will be provided by data collection within the GROFarmS project. So within the GROFarmS project, we'll be collecting data as part of the National Farm Survey on a sample of organic farms. This will also provide the opportunity to financially benchmark the performance of organic and conventional farms nationally, but also to compare organic farms internationally. As highlighted, access to and cost of organic feed are an important challenge facing not just I suppose, the organic livestock sector, but also an opportunity for organic tillage farms. So the farm project it's a research proposal currently under review, which aims to undertake a feasibility assessment for developing and investing in domestic organic feed milling and also growing the area of organic feed crops. The strategy also calls for maximising the drawdown of EU funding under EU Horizon research calls in which to undertake organic research. So the OFINE project, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, is a project that I've just been awarded as well, that I'm coordinating, and it looks at Organic Farming Innovations Network in Europe. And it's a new project due to start the next month, which looks really at bringing together farmers and advisors across Europe to be able to learn from each other. There are also two other organic farming research applications under a second stage of review as part of the EU Ecological Partnership Call, which looks to establish living labs which would work with farmers to develop sustainable farming practices in specific locations, with a particular focus on organic farming. So this brings us to the GROFarmS project, which is mentioned as this large organic farming research project funded by the Department of Agriculture. The project has a number of objectives with the ultimate goal of supporting evidence-based organic farming conversion and best practice adoption. So while there are various opinions on the benefits of organic farming, there's a lack of clear evidence and figures on the sustainability of Irish organic farms. The GROFarmS project aims to address this gap by putting figures on the performance and sustainability of organic farms, and it'll do this in a number of ways. So the economic and environmental impact of organic beef and sheep production systems will be investigated through animal and grassland research trials, along with the collection of survey data on commercial farms within the NFS. So the sample of organic farms is currently being canvassed, and when established will provide in-depth socioeconomic and environmental benchmarking data. So we can look at more detail at specific research areas covered by the project. And the first two highlighted here involve animal and grassland research trials, which for the beef trials will take place in both Grange and a newly developed organic beef research farm in Kildavin. The sheep research farms, on the other hand, they'll be based on the Sheep Research Centre in Athenry. The other two project areas are cross-cutting. Knowledge transfer and exchange task was key in providing a structure for disseminating outputs, communicating with farmers, and providing stakeholder input. The sustainability benchmarking, as I've already mentioned, will involve collection of financial data on a sample of real farms. So starting with the organic beef finishing research farm, just picture here provided, it's a new, a newly established 40-hectare farm currently in the process of conversion to organic standards. And this has been supported by David Wall and his colleagues in Johnstown Castle. So much of the land has been reseeded, works are ongoing to comply with organic standards, and the farm will be fully certified organic farm. And they're currently in the process of sourcing livestock for the first winter feeding trials. In terms of the details on this trials, as Paul Crossan is the Teagasc lead for the organic beef finishing task, and they have the goal of developing efficient and profitable production blueprints. So on the Kildavin farm, 72 spring-born, early and late maturing bred suckler weanlings are being sourced, and they will sort into trial groups and finished at different range of different ages, so 19, 24, 28 months of age. So that's like the end of the second grazing season, in the second winter, or during the third grazing season, and they'll be finished on a range of different diets. So the performance will be measured in terms of feed intake, growth rates, and production information from the trials then will be used to calculate the impact of organic production systems on profitability, as well as profitability, but also environmental dimensions such as emissions. As well as that, soil health, biodiversity, carbon turnover of the farm will also be assessed. So farmers also want information around their options about converting farm buildings and infrastructures required to meet organic farming standards. such as this 50% strawback bedded area or greater space requirements for livestock. And the Kildavan farm will be able to provide a showcase and demonstration for what that looks like for farmers as part of open days and group visits which are envisaged as part of the project as it develops. And parallel trials will also be taking place in Grange, looking at the performance of winter diets in more detail, as well as identifying optimal finishing diets. So as a result, these trials will inform then the diets that are offered subsequently in subsequent years in Kildavan. So Philip Creighton is the Teagasc lead for the sheep research trials in Athenry, and they'll be looking at finishing options and management systems for both organic hill and lowland lambs. So as I mentioned, this issue of organic leakage of animals is also a particular issue for the organic sheep sector. So part of this trial will look at the role of forage crops, so namely rape and hybrid brassicas to finish hill-bred store lambs within an organic management system. There will also be an indoor trial examine a range of forage and concentrate-based diets to finish hill-bred lambs, and look to quantify, I suppose, any difference between the various grass, clover, silage-based diets when combined with varying types and quantities of organic concentrates. And the diets will be evaluated in terms of lamb performance and economics. Lowland lamb finishing study will also be conducted comparing two forage-based finishing systems, but both will be based on kind of white clover for grazing and red clover silage, but one will also incorporate forage crops. So the two systems we evaluated in terms of pasture, forage production, utilization and carrying capacity, the impact of feeding system on lamb performance and finishing potential, and ultimately the economics of the system. In terms of organic sustainability and benchmarking, this is a task that we've led by Mary Ryan, which aims to collect information on the profile and sustainability of organic farms. So while we have detailed production data through the Teagasc National Farm Survey across the main conventional farm systems, we lack information on organic farms. This is mainly because the number of organic farms, I suppose, up to recently has been so few. This has obviously changed with increasing interest, uptake, and targets to support the growth of the sector further. So therefore, there's a pressing need to have information on the profile of organic farms. And to get this information, we're going to extend the National Farm Survey to include a sample of approximately 100 organic farms, and not just beef and sheep, but also tillage and dairy. This data will identify what different production practices are being applied on farms and what they mean in terms of cost of production and profitability. Beyond the financials, we'll also use a survey to identify environmental and social sustainability of organic farming. We know we collect a lot more information within NFS now on these metrics. We know that organic farming practices have the potential to support high levels of environmental sustainability. And through the survey, we'll be able to identify and gather information on what that means and how it compares to conventional farms. So in terms of things like greenhouse gas emissions and measures associated with water quality, such as nitrate leaching. Key resource to allow us to capture all this information is a newly appointed organic farm recorder, Niall Stringer, who is currently canvassing farmers to participate and will be tasked with surveying them manually. So when the NFS data does become available, it will enable the project to financially benchmark the performance of organic and conventional farms nationally, but also to compare organic farms internationally using these networks, the IFCN for dairy and the Agri Benchmarks for dry stock farms. Joe Kelleher, many will know Joe, he's an organic specialist and he'll lead a task on knowledge transfer and exchange. So central to this whole project, obviously, a focus on the core scientific work packages, but central to the whole project is this involvement of the Teagasc Organic Specialist Team and the 6 regional dedicated organic advisors. So they're an important role in supporting the research, providing feedback with farmers to inform research trials and in communicating messages from the research with farmers and demonstrating practice. I suppose that's already been clear and instrumental in the development of the Kildavan farm, where the specialist team and advisors have been key in guiding the conversion of the farm to organic standards and also informing the design of trials to reflect, I suppose, what's required to meet organic standards, but also the practices that are actually being applied in Irish organic farms. So it's important to have that expert input that's based on their experience of interacting with the organic farmers on the ground who have already converted their farming organically. As a result, when this project emerged, they'll be communicated through Teagasc Open Days, national beef and sheep events, and open days in the Kildavan farm. There's also other farm events such as farm walks as part of the growing Organics Monitor Farm program, and they'll be used to showcase some of these best practice technologies being applied on real demonstration farms. In addition, the 6 new organic advisors appointed by Teagasc in the last 12 months, will be organising approximately 24 farm walks in the year across the country. And that allow farmers to attend local events, which will provide another forum for communicating updates from the project with farmers. As organic farming is new to most farmers and indeed many advisors, there are many questions in relation to costs, profitability, environmental benefits, changes required in farm practice, costs of conversion, and new knowledge and skills required. So research will be used to upskill the wider advisory staff in organic farming through in-service training, which will help support organic farmers and those thinking of converting. Ultimately, I suppose the project aims to build a network of scientists, advisors, and farmers and industry stakeholders who can work together to generate and communicate organic information to the industry and the wider public. This, I suppose, external input, I suppose, is a key part of the project as well. And a national stakeholder advisory group and international scientific board have been set up for the project to provide that external perspective and also that international expertise and experience. Moving on from the GROFarmS, I might discuss just briefly some other recently approved projects. And moving on from this kind of external perspective and international perspective, this is where this OFINE project comes in. So OFINE stands for Organic Farming Innovations Network in Europe. So it's a newly awarded project that was funded under the EU Rising Call under Cluster 6. So it's a specific call which aims to accelerate the transition to more sustainable farming practices and production systems. So this project, it will create stakeholder knowledge and exchange network, and in order to support farmers to convert, as well as existing farmers looking to improve practice. And to do this project, we'll work closely with the Organic Specialist Advisory. Cross visits will be organised across partner countries, which will bring farmers and advisors together to examine trials of commercial farms. So wider dissemination of these practices will be supported by compiling information from partnering countries and transferring them into practical information sources such as video clips and fact sheets, which we made accessible then to farmers. The ultimate idea of the project is to support, the cross-fertilization, these ideas or the experiences that are maybe already moved on in other partner countries, to share those experiences and practices across EU producers. The research element of the project then will explore how well farmers across the different partner countries are supported in developing their organic farming practices and innovating. So what are their connections with extension, with advisory, research, and education, and also the value chain look like? So how well developed is this idea of the ACUS, or the Agriculture Knowledge and Innovation System for Organic Farming? How well is it developed in these partner countries, and what does it mean for how best to communicate with farmers? I'll briefly then mention just 2 last projects. One is ENACT Organics. So it stands for Evaluating National and EU Comprehensive Targets in Organics. And it's currently a project proposal stage and kind of under final review. And it's awaiting decision from the Department of Agriculture. And this is another project that I'm leading, which is a desk-based research project which responds to the DAFM Policy and Strategic Studies Research Call. And the aim of the project is to kind of understand better the feasibility of reaching these targets for organic production set out in the Climate Action Plan. So the project will use farm-level models and data from the Teagasc National Farm Survey to develop scenarios which will model this potential impact of meeting targets at the farm level in terms of farm numbers, farm incomes, economic and environmental sustainability metrics. But the project will also go further to try and understand the potential macro impact that this would have in the sector in terms of impact on national agricultural output, input use, and environmental metrics. So a key input to this project obviously would be the input of external expert stakeholders, which will be used to kind of assess the technical and economic feasibility of those different scenarios. Under that same research call, there's also a current proposal there called FARM, which is, I suppose, it tries to address this idea of, I mentioned previously, this lack of organic milling capacity in Ireland, which is effectively curtailing the expansion of organic livestock sector or the potential value that can be created from the organic farming sector, and also the potential to grow more tillage crops. So it's also, again, it's a 1 year, it's a desk-based research under this research call, and it'll form a feasibility assessment of developing organic feed mill within Ireland. And this project has been led by Fiona Thorne and Teagasc, and will incorporate this farm level analysis and draw on and manifest that again in existing models. It'll also use expert input to draw up a set of potential scenarios whereby Irish organic feed crop production is expanded, and assess what that would mean for current and potential farm production. Beyond the farm gate, a process of stakeholder consultation and feedback with the expert panel will also be used to assess kind of the technical, economic, and wider feasibility of a number of organic feed processing options. So together, I suppose, with the pre and post farm gate, it'll inform an economic, environmental, and social sustainability impact assessment of growing organic feed mill in Ireland, as well as an assessment of options to support investment by farmers and processors in feed milling. So just to summarize, I suppose the organic farming sector, it's expanding rapidly. With that rapid expansion, it's raised a number of challenges that I've highlighted. And Teagasc, I suppose, has made significant investment in terms of trying to respond to those challenges. In terms of new research projects that I mentioned, the GROFarmS, OFINE, and ACT, but also, I suppose, what that constitutes really is across, probably even more significantly, is a commitment to collaboration across the organisation. So not just across research programs, but also across directorates, so knowledge transfer, research, and education. But at the same time, I've highlighted that we're responding to many of these challenges, but research gaps still remain. Many of these gaps are highlighted or have been identified by the Organics Research Working Group, and they include requirement for more research around organic dairy and tillage production, so things like weed control on tillage crops, organic tillage crops, but also things like product quality, so sensory aspects of eating quality, taste panels, things like this, but also above and below ground biodiversity impacts of organic farming systems. So when I suppose there's been a significant investment, there's a lot of work to be done, and many of these projects are just at the infancy stage. So it's kind of an exciting time, and the next 4 years, it'll be a great opportunity to maybe come back and share some of the research findings from those projects. And I'd like to just finish by thanking all colleagues within Teagasc for their time and commitment in developing those projects, and also to the organic farmers as well that are participating in things like the National Farm Survey, and obviously the Department of Agriculture for funding some of these projects. If you want to keep up to date in terms of this organic research, I've just included a kind of a link to that research, and also to the Teagasc organic Twitter page as well. So thank you for your time, thanks to the audience, and thanks, Pat.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Kevin. I suppose the sense you get from your presentation is a good bit of work being done, but it's only the tip of the iceberg. You might stop sharing your presentation there. The tip of the iceberg in terms of the quantity of work that needs to be done. I suppose one thing that struck me early on in your presentation is the need, I suppose, for a degree of balance between the various sectors of organics. I suppose particularly, is it fair to say you need tillage, suckler enterprises, and finishing enterprises all to develop in tandem for a really effective organic sector to develop?
Yeah, exactly, Pat. That is it. Kind of, I've highlighted this idea of maybe sort of an unbalanced value chain, and the fact that the majority of adoption has been in those farms where I suppose like their suckler farms or their sheep farms producing lambs. So this idea of leakage, where the majority of adoption has been on these farms, but I suppose we need more of these beef finishing farms. We need more, I suppose, feed crops grown organically in Ireland to reduce that reliance on imported expensive organic feeds. But that's where I suppose that the reason for the focus on those beef finishing trials within Kildavin, but also that lamb finishing options as well within Athenry, is just to be able to provide what are the economics look at those systems, to provide confidence in farmers if they are to adopt about how these, I suppose, how the economics of these systems stack up, how they can be managed most profitably and most efficiently. But also, I suppose, it highlights, especially in an organic farming system, this idea of there's some very, very good and very well run organic farms out there that maybe incorporate this kind of an integrated farming system that grow some tillage crops on their farm, or they're growing red clover silage or whatever it may be, but maybe they're also growing some combi crops as well. And I think particularly when you look at monitor farm program in Teagasc through the organics advisory side of things, you see some farms that are I suppose implementing some of these technologies, and that are you know what I mean, the performance is looking very well. So it's be able to kind of capture that and document it for farmers.
And I suppose it strikes me then, particularly, and I suppose this is where the Kildavin work may come into its own, but it strikes me that specialized finishing of organic is high cost and potentially high risk enterprise to some degree, because you're potentially buying in more expensive weanlings, you have very much more expensive feed going into the system, and you have possibly a degree of capital expenditure to convert buildings to be suitable for the system as well. So it strikes me that for that to work, we're going to need the marketing side to be delivering a very significant premium for organic beef to make it pay.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole market premium for organic beef is an important aspect of it. I suppose just on that, obviously that is one big barrier for maybe some farmers converting, is particularly this idea of complying with organic standards around infrastructure and buildings, this meeting this 50% lie-back area. But I suppose when kind of a key contribution to this project will be maybe trying to understand when you have these enhanced TAM grants, what that looks like in terms of support, and that so there's a lot of supports there around TAMs, and 6% grant for you know what I mean, for conversion of sheds and to support that infrastructure. But also you can see that many of these farms as well that are some are growing, you know, they're growing red clover silage as well, and they're finishing with, maybe in some cases they're finishing with lower or no concentrate input on farms as well. So in many ways there's farms that are doing it quite at very efficiently as well. And in general, I suppose a lot of beef farms that are finishing animals, it can be a high cost production system anyway. So there are different ways and technologies that I suppose been able to reduce that cost profile as well. And that's the kind of technologies they're looking at. You know, what does it mean in terms of growing red clover silage, and what live weight gains are achievable on those different diets, you know?
Yeah, and I suppose we need to acknowledge that there's a good bit of work going on with Borbia on the marketing side. I suppose up to now we probably would have been consuming a lot of our organic internally, but if it's to grow, it has to go into external markets. So a lot of work going on there as well on that
There
side.
is, yeah. There's been good
Cathal,
investment in that.
a lot of questions coming in.
Yeah, Kevin, there's plenty of good questions. Just going back to the very start, a little bit of what you're discussing. You showed us a couple of slides of how we're comparing against Europe, and there's a kind of comment in there, like what are we doing different or wrong compared to our European counterparts, and maybe what I know someone commented on Portugal having a very good uptake of conversion. Like, what did you compare? What models they're using compared to what you're thinking of using?
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, it's clear that we're kind of at the lower level of adoption, but I suppose what you can really see in the last 4 years, I suppose, what I'd highlight maybe as much as anything is a tripling of the level of farmers that have come into organic farming system. Look, obviously there's incentives for that, but you know that whole, as I said, you know, farmers will choose to change enterprises, I suppose, depending on how well they feel, maybe they're supported by it, how well that system is going to work for them in terms of profitability of that. And you can see maybe with supports from the organic farming scheme and like that a lot of farms, I think that, you know, it's a profitable option. I think in the past it was seen very much more as a niche. We see now an awful lot of what would have been traditional organic farming technologies are mainstreamed. In agricultural research, there's a focus on red clover, incorporation of clover in clover swards, red clover silage, growing a combi crop. So there's a lot of existing organic farms that have been at this for a long period of times that are already far down the road in terms of adopting those technologies. And I think a lot of those, when more of those technologies become mainstreamed, I think the acceptability of converting to organics is no longer a barrier. I think in the past it was seen as something very different. I don't think that barrier is there. The greater the adoption is, I think it breaks down the barrier that's there. But also, I mentioned about all the kind of different supports and investments from the different institutions, like the Borbia investing, like the Teagasc investing in terms of research and technology. And I think when that comes to fore as well, it helps farmers to think about it as a viable option. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think there's just been a significant shift in Ireland in recent past, and I suppose it's one of the countries that's probably growing the most rapidly in terms of organic adoption. And at the same time, I think we have a grass based type system which is readily compatible with organic farming systems as well. So I think there's a huge scope probably to increase it further.
Yeah, you mentioned there as well leakage once or twice during your presentation.
Yeah.
I suppose for those that don't really understand what you mean, can you tell us what leakage means? And then second part of that question maybe, is this financially driven, incentives financially, or is there something a bit deeper rooted? Is it the technologies? Is there a behavioral change part to it as well?
Yeah, thanks, Colin. So leakage, yeah, it's an issue in the organic sector. As I mentioned, the majority of farms that have come into organics are suckler farms in particular. So they're producing effectively weanlings and store cattle, and in some cases, a proportion of those animals they're being sold in conventional marts, and they're being sold to conventional farms. So they're not actually being killed as organic cattle or finished as organic cattle. So in a way, the animal leaks out of the organic farm value chain and into the conventional system. And if you think about it, obviously there's been an investment of that farm in terms of complying with organic standards. So there's effectively a loss of value when they move out of that. So the goal would be to try and maintain as many of those animals within the organic value chain and finish them organically. But to do that, we need more, I suppose, more information, more supports for farmers to be able to look at the economics of finishing cattle to grow more feed crops as well. So it's a particular issue. It's also an issue in the sheep sector as well. So that's why that kind of, I suppose, justifies the focus on the finishing aspects of the beef and sheep research in the GROFarmS project. Yeah, in terms of, I suppose, that I mentioned about the organic farming scheme, and you can see that, I suppose, that drive and focus on organics and the extra incentives in the organic farming scheme has been critical, I suppose, in thinking about farmers about it as a viable option to switch over. And I think that has been very important in terms of farmers making their choices, particularly when they were weighing up their decisions when the new CAP program came in, but what schemes to go into, whether you join an agri-environmental scheme like Acres, or whether you join a measure like the organic farming scheme. So I think particularly I saw that huge uptake in the new program was announced. Farmers were looking at their options, and they saw that it was very attractive maybe to move into organics, for many farmers. So yeah, that's been driving it. And another part of the project I didn't mention too much, but we're trying to look at those behavioural factors. So I suppose what's driven the farmers to convert their practices? Is it financial incentives? Is it in terms of organic farming scheme incentives? But is it also maybe to reduce cost of production for some farmers, to cut back, be more extensive, reduce input costs, things like that? Or is it driven by potentially increasing the value of their output? So we're trying to capture that through kind of survey data of actual commercial farms. What's the decision that they have chosen to convert over to organic farms? But we're also asking questions of the wider population of farms to the national farm system. So farms that aren't currently organic, that are conventional, what are their attitudes and opinions around organic conversion? Is it an option that they'd see would be something for them? And what would be required to change for them to be able to think about that as an option? So we're trying to understand that behavioural issue, but also what are the barriers to converting to organic. So that's a big part of the project as well.
And I think you mentioned there are Acres there somewhere and environmental kind of schemes. How compatible, or have you looked into that side of the house? Are they with organic farming?
Yeah, it's going to be another part of that analysis I mentioned as well. Like, is one thing that's often mentioned as well is that there's if you're in an acres type scheme, if you have a land-based measures as well, you won't be funded for kind of two land-based measures. So the organic farm scheme payment is paid on a number of hectares of land in the organic farming scheme. So if you're being paid for land-based measure in acres, you won't be paid your organic farming scheme payment on that same area of land. So to avoid kind of double funding of effectively two agri-environmental measures. So that is an issue for farmers. I mentioned a lot of farmers would have weighed up, assessed their options at the start of the previous CAP program. A lot of farmers would have committed to an acres program for 5 years, and obviously if a lot of their land is dedicated to land-based measures under acres, they may not be looking then at joining the organic farming scheme if there's double payment issues on it. Of course, if you had a farm that was very over a very large area as well, you could potentially maximize payment under acres and also receive a significant organics payment. But effectively, if you'd need a larger run of land to be able to do that, yeah. So there are things that we're looking at, yeah.
You mentioned there I suppose looking at the environmental outcomes from organics, and I suppose one of the things our National Farm Survey has gone into in the last 5 or 6 years is the sustainability analysis of our farming systems. So will you be doing a kind of a comparative analysis of organic versus conventional production systems as part of the study and as part of the integration with NFS?
Yeah, that would be envisaged, all right, that we look at the profile of the organic farms and how they compare to conventional. I suppose it's important to understand as well, maybe where those organic farms, that are converted, where they were previously before they converted as well. You know what I mean, in the sense that you can't, when you're making comparisons, you don't want to compare two very different groups of farms or different profiles as well. So an important part of that would be trying to understand as well, for that sample of farms that we have that have converted, what do their farming practice look like beforehand? What changes have they made? Have they become more extensive or not? What different measures or maybe practices have they implemented as well? So we expect to see quite a difference across that group of farms. There's a lot of farms doing a lot of different things in the organic sample as well. So it'll be interesting to try and capture some of those technologies that they're implementing. Yeah.
Well,
And the Kildavin farms, a couple of questions coming up on it, just to group a few of them together. That was formerly organic farm before, and then it went back into normal, and then it's gone back. Will it be certified shortly? And also, do you have many learnings from the past work done there?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, as I said, as you said, it was previously an organic research farm, and I think those trials were stopped there back in the early 2000s, the time of the downturn. So a lot of the sheds that are already kind of effectively compatible with organic farming standards. There are a lot of straw bedded sheds for finishing cattle as well. So yeah, they're currently in the process of looking for organic certification. So as I mentioned, that farm will be a fully certified organic farm. I think that adds to the benefit in terms of a demonstration for farmers coming in. They'll be able to see, like, this is what an organic certified farm looks like. In terms of I was at that Johnstown Castle open day. We had a stand at as well, and I met some of the staff that previously worked on that farm, on the Kildavin farm, and it was an organic farm as well. And we discussed maybe some of the kind of the work that had been conducted on that. And I think as part of this project, we discussed it briefly as well, but it would be interesting to try and gather previous research trials as well that have been conducted on that farm. And so to bring together what information and research trials that previously been conducted from that farm into a repository, and try and make it understandable as well. So to try and learn from maybe some of the work that had already previously been done there in the past. So that's part of the project as well.
We've had colleagues on before in relation to organic tillage, and kind of demonstrating that it can be extremely profitable, particularly at the current prices for organic cereals. But yet we don't seem to be getting a huge uptake in that space. Is there any reason for that, or is there anything we can do to progress that further?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think I mentioned briefly there's some projects there that are being trying to be developed around this, like living labs, so trying to work with farmers to try and come up with approaches. There's a one there focused on looking at growing of protein crops as well. And so that's in proposal stage as well. So looking at the potential for them. I suppose when there's probably need more information and probably more resources for farmers to be confident in terms of what those economics look like. Obviously, there's been some work done and showed that they can be quite profitable. And just to highlight things like, for instance, that in an organic tillage scenario, you can potentially not convert all your farm to organic tillage, that you can convert a portion of your farm to organic tillage as well. So it can be a means for farmers, I suppose, not being able to at least even dip the toe into organic tillage and see how well or not it suits their farming system, because it's not going to suit every farmer, but I think it can be a good option for some farmers. So just even awareness of things like that you can do effectively partial conversion of your farm. You can have a conventional tillage and an organic tillage enterprise as well. So and I think, as I mentioned, that is one area that I suppose there's scope for further research around things like weed control and organic tillage crops, and there has been some work done and thought process gone into what would be required to develop a research proposal around that area.
Do we expect to see maybe some trials going on in the likes of Oak Park on the tillage side of the house?
I mentioned there that we have this European Innovation Network project as well, and the idea would be as well that we'll be developing trials, maybe working with like the Monitor Farm program or that as well, to try and showcase trials, bring in international expertise, and also to give advisors and farmers a scope to go out and look at what's been done internationally, particularly maybe on tillage crops. Maybe they're further down the line in terms of organic tillage in some other countries as well, and to have a look at what they're doing out there, what's working for them, and maybe can some of that information be brought back, and can we produce some materials as well that maybe support farmers or give them some information about it. So I think particularly that international context there would be useful from that OFINE project. Yeah.
Just a question there in reference to biodiversity. And I suppose greenhouse gases, we can probably calculate on a sheet of paper what the impact is going to be on greenhouse gases. A little bit trickier with water, but I suppose assumption of use of less nutrient, it probably indicates that we will see improvements from there. But are we likely to, or are going to be in a position to do anything to empirically prove that organic systems are better for biodiversity?
I mentioned that on the Kildavin farm as well. There is this hope to kind of capture some information around things like on soil quality and below ground biodiversity and some aspects of that. And I mentioned the initial working group they had as part of the research proposal we had. There was a proposal looking at more detail around the kind of biodiversity aspects as well, and trying to capture that. So that's something that we'd be hoping that can be expanded more into the future. I mentioned as well this other living lab research proposal. That's a kind of second phase of evaluation, and the idea it's been headed up by Sarah Kavanagh in Teagasc, and that proposal is trying to look at kind of agroecological practices, looking at, I suppose, how they impact in terms of things like biodiversity, issues around like things like pollinators. I suppose the adoption of on these kind of conventional but also organic farms, are there certain practices around management that can help improve biodiversity on farms, and trying to capture information around that. So that's a project that it's not approved yet at the moment, and it's a stage of review, but there is plans to try and look at more detail at those kind of aspects as well, because anecdotally, obviously people think about it, the information is good for the environment, but we kind of lack information on that sustainability data at those farms. So it's a key piece that needs to be filled. And even something like, they're complex issues, even something like greenhouse gas emissions, obviously, you can think about how, the story would be around reduced emissions, but there's also potential other stories around, later maturing breeds or longer time to finish. So, it's trying to understand, finishing periods as well. So there's different aspects that will have to be taken into account in terms of calculating those emissions metrics. But the thing is, we have colleagues here in Teagasc in the Ag Econ and Farm Service Department doing a lot of work in terms of trying to develop metrics for those sustainability indicators that will capture at the uncommercial farms, real farms, but also in the trials in Athenry and Grange and Kildavin.
We haven't mentioned much about dairy there. Is your research mainly focused on beef and kind of sheep and a bit of tillage? What's the plans for dairying down the line?
Yeah, I suppose the thing on the tillage, on the dairy side of things, is that there is a small population of organic tillage farms. Or dairy farms. So approximately there are around 70 organic dairy farms, and there's some very, very, very well run organic dairy farms, and they're quite diverse in terms of the systems they operate as well. So there was a proposal. I said in the initial proposal there was a proposal to look at organic dairy systems and look at trials on organic dairy research as part of a bigger experiment. So yeah, there has been kind of proposals around what kind of key things to be looked at in the organic dairy sector, and like the adoption around organic dairy has been has been quite low. So you're looking at only 70 farms, but we're trying to capture. I suppose one way we're capturing data on it, at least within this project, is through the NFS farms. So we're trying to collect a reasonable sample of farms that we can do some analysis in terms of how they're performing. So even though the population of farms is only 70 farms, to have something meaningful, we have to capture quite a significant amount of those farms compared to if you had a large population of farms. So to provide any kind of meaningful standalone analysis, we have to effectively have a minimum of 10 farms within that system. So 10 organic dairy farms, and particularly if you look at, trying to capture maybe different systems. So, year-round, winter milk or spring milk systems as well. It requires us to capture quite a lot of the data on that small population of farms, and that's something we'll be doing within the NFS.
And labour, I suppose, comes up a good bit. There's a few questions around labour and people's kind of understanding of organic farming. Some of the practices are slightly different, and it might be some more labour intensive at certain points. Are you kind of considering that, or are you kind of going to use technologies to work around that?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. It was something that was discussed, but yeah, it's something we could look at, maybe particularly in the NFS. And it was something that came up, but yeah, I think it's something that maybe could be looked at in more detail. It's not something that we really had planned to focus on in the context of the current project, but was something that was mentioned, and it's probably something that probably needs to be looked at in more detail. And you're looking at, as I said, talking about going into organic finishing systems, it can be quite a leap in terms of growing these new crops or growing red clover silage, and there's obviously a labour input issue as well, and developing capacity around that. So yeah, that's something that could be looked at.
You mentioned quite a bit collaboration across European projects, and I suppose maybe organic systems are probably more compatible across Europe than our other farming systems. Have we a lot to learn from the countries that have, I suppose, made a lot more progress in terms of extent of organics than we have to date?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned from that international story. So you look at countries like Austria and these countries, they're already have hit those kind of they're beyond that EU target of 25% organic adoption. So they're very much mainstreamed in those countries. They have a long history and experience with those systems, and they've developed a lot over time. They have a lot of knowledge that's built up over that. So when you have these we see in many ways, it's kind of can we piggyback on some of that experience? Can we learn from them, particularly in things like in tillage crop and cropping and tillage as well? Can we learn from their experiences as well? And how compatible or how transferable are some of their practices and results? And I think in the past as well, you probably saw a lot of Irish organic farms that had been in tillage or been in organics for a number of years. Their source of information in many cases was to look abroad, what was going on in the UK, what were the experiences of farmers over there, where there'd been a kind of a longer tradition of organic farming as well. So that's been the I suppose the story in the past. A lot of these organic farmers were quite innovative, but they were outward looking and they looked abroad at what was done abroad. So I think there's a lot of lessons that can be brought back from that international experience. Yeah.
There's a good few questions here around the impact Borbia could have on the markets and trends, and I suppose consumer demand and pricing, and even the difference between conventional, say, beef versus organic beef. Are you engaging a bit with Borbia, or is that kind of outside your remit a little bit?
Yeah, no, there will be plans definitely to engage with them around kind of, especially we had some engagement in this previous project around things like understanding kind of the issue around leakage, and the calculations around leakage as well. And I think an important part of that will be kind of I suppose to be working with them and learning off them about what those issues are on the market side of things. So yeah, there will be plans to engage with them. But yeah, that'll be something that'll be important. I suppose we'll be trying to capture in terms of the modeling those different farming systems. Obviously, I mentioned that the trials will ultimately feed into kind of modeling exercises. There's models there in terms of Grange beef model and a Teagasc lamb production model as well. And there'll be a lot of that'll provide a lot of information to those models to be able to kind of understand, if you can parameterize it different, if you change, if you look at things like beef prices, what would the impact be in terms of finishing systems and margins as well. So that whole price story, not just output prices in terms of beef prices, but also input prices and maybe, additional costs around input prices. But, that'll be part of the key part of the story when those modeling exercises are done for the beef systems and sheep systems, to understand, I suppose, what influences the margins on beef farms more. So there'll be a real focus really in terms of input and output prices.
I think one of the key lessons for me from your talk today is listen, we're at the start of something. There's a huge amount of work to be done. I suppose if we do get close to the 25% of organics in the country, you're probably looking for 25% of the Teagasc resource to do the work that's needed on it. We're not quite there yet.
No. There's no, but like as I said, like it's been a huge change. Even get to that 5%. There's a lot of investment gone in across the sector, not just in Teagasc, but across those other institutions. So there's a lot of energy in it, and there's a lot of work that's been set up. But and as I mentioned, there has been work done in this area in the past, and as well, I think it's trying to bring together all that information, really, ultimately to support those farmers. Help conversion, but also those farmers that are in it as well. Provide figures to be able to support their practice as well, so that they can look to likes of Teagasc for information about their farming system as well, and so yeah, there's a lot to be done.
Okay, we're coming to an end. So listen, thank you very much, Mark. You're a little on the late side. We're nearly finished.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Funny.
How are you this morning?
Funny should bump into you. Yes, I'm good. I'm good. A little bit of an unexpected arrival this morning, but I hope you don't mind if I interrupt for a few minutes. And Pat, and good morning to you all, and good morning to everybody. In case anyone didn't know, we're actually celebrating a little bit of a milestone today in the Signpost webinar. And well, Pat, you may not have shared it with too many, but you're going to be leaving us soon in Teagasc, and we just want to take a moment to acknowledge and celebrate the very special milestone today. And after a long and illustrious career in Teagasc, today is actually Pat's final webinar with us. And it's a truly bittersweet moment for us all as you move on. And we are very grateful to you for the huge contribution that you've made to the webinar series, but obviously throughout your entire career in Teagasc. And the energy, the expertise, the passion for connecting with those various audiences across the Irish agri-food sector, and of course, making each session valuable, engaging, and insightful for everybody tuning in. So our audience has grown massively over the years since we started this webinar back during COVID in 2020. And the numbers have grown, as I said, but also I'd like to think that the depth and understanding of that our audience has grown also, and that's huge credit to you and your leadership around the webinar. So on behalf of myself and the team, we do want to, and of course all of the viewers, we want to thank you and for your commitment, and we want to wish you the best in the future. And we know that this is just the start of another chapter for you. I know you have plenty of plans up your sleeve, but we just want to say a huge thank you to you, Pat, for your huge contribution over the years.
Thank you very much. And it's been I suppose, an absolute privilege, both in terms of this webinar, which I suppose started as an 8-week project, and whatever it is, 250 or 240 weeks later, still going and still going strong, sometimes to our surprise. So it's been great. And it's been, I suppose, a real opportunity to share a lot of messages around, I suppose, the sustainability, environmental, and broader non-environmental issues. So it's I suppose one of the great things about it is every week you're here, you learn something new, and that's fantastic. And I suppose in general, it's been an absolute privilege to have worked in Teagasc and previously ACOT for 39 years. And I think two key things that have led to that privilege is one is an organization with an incredibly strong ethos in terms of supporting the agricultural industry, and groups of colleagues right throughout the years who have been absolutely amazing. And I suppose the future is in really good hands. There's a lot of really good people in place. I'm sitting, actually, while we're on separate bits of the screen, I'm sitting beside Cathal here, so he's an exemplar of the kind of quality of staff that's there. So listen, been absolute privilege, and I suppose with a little bit of heavy heart I'm going, but it's time. So thanks for your kind words, Mark.
No, it's been a privilege, likewise, and we wish you all the best in the future. So Pat, I'm going to leave it to you to formally wrap up today's webinar.
Okay, so thanks very much, Mark, for your kind words. Kevin, thanks for your presentation. I think we'll probably be having you back over the next number of years, just to get updates on the work and you and some of your colleagues. So thanks for that. Thanks to Yvonne and Cathal in terms of helping with the production of the Signpost webinar. And it's in very safe hands with the two of them and Mark, yourself, and a couple of others taking the lead there. I particularly want to say thanks to Yvonne over the last few years in terms of the work she puts into this webinar. We can never get her to put her face on screen, so people may not know what she looks like, but one of these days we'll persuade her. But she is the powerhouse behind what we do. So I'll leave it at that. Next week we have, I suppose, a follow-on to a tillage session earlier in the month, looking at climate adaptation in tillage, and we'll have Kieran Collins from Teagasc, specialist in Teagasc, dealing with that. So I suppose I'll transfer now from maybe presenter to regular watcher of the Signpost webinar. So listen, thank you, and until next week, have a good weekend, and we'll see you at the Signpost webinar next week. Bye.